Marisa Norcross.
And I'm Dave Freud, and this is The Next Page. Marisa, how are you? Welcome back.
Thank you. Yes, it's good to be back. The sun is shining.
It is.
It's a nice, beautiful spring day, so it's a good day to be back.
And I'm telling you that I am certain all of our listeners, after listening to my last podcast, are really glad you're back, because it took me 5 tries just to start it. And when I got all done, and it was short, I think it might be like 13, 14 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Tim says to me, yeah, you got to change the beginning to fly. So anyway, I am really, really glad you're back.
That's funny.
Because I appreciate you adding some balance and helping me think through some of these topics. So my post for this morning said this was frightening.
Mm-hmm.
And it was. So as you think about, what you edited and what because you saw it before anybody else,
mm-hmm.
What were your initial thoughts?
Yeah, your post for this week, it surprised me, but then, I think the more we talked about it, maybe it didn't surprise me because we had kind of seen some of this coming for you.
We did.
And, for those of you who haven't read the post yet, David is sharing about his reflections from the month of April. And there were some takeaways from your first quarter reflection that kind of propelled you to change the way you reflect. But your reflections were kind of scary for the month.
They were.
So share a little bit about that.
So, as we ended when my first quarter reflections revealed that I wasn't doing a good enough job reflecting,
mm-hmm.
that I had kind of pencil whipped some of that, and I was just kind of rushing through the month or the year, so to speak. And so I committed to our listeners that I would do a better job reflecting, and I would be doing it, daily again, and I would be looking at it weekly, and I would be and I actually had scheduled for the last, I forgot what date this was. So I guess it would have been the 29th of April, if I'm not mistaken. I had scheduled that as a reflection day, so to speak, to look over the month of April. And when I reflected, I found very few learnings and almost no positives.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm looking at it on a daily basis, I didn't catch it.
Mm-hmm.
And even when I looked like the first couple weeks, I didn't catch it. But when I looked at the whole month, when I looked at the 4 weeks in a row, it was scary.
Mm-hmm.
Because all of my reflections seem to be dealing with negatives.
So for a refresher, your questions are what went well, what didn't go well, what did I learn, what will I change, and what was the highlight of my day. So my first question for you is, what did you find you were writing for the what went well and for the highlight of your day?
So sometimes it was a question mark.
Really?
Like literally question mark. Now that's not necessarily
mm-hmm.
unusual.
Okay.
But yeah, it was okay. I had a good coaching session today
mm-hmm.
with one of my clients. My class went well.
So work related.
But those are late.
Mm-hmm.
Work related. Yeah, all work related. And for instance, so I had to go to a conference in Colorado Springs, which Colorado Springs is a beautiful place to go to. The place where where I was having this conference, it was a meeting. There's 20 some of us attend this meeting. I think about 18 of us were in the room. The rest were virtual. I mean, the place actually overlooks Pikes Peak. Like you can see Pikes Peak out the window of the building. It's like, so it is an amazing place. I had no positives from that. I had only issues. It was a challenging meeting. I focused on the fact that my flight, I was taking a red eye home. The red eye was going to take me from Denver to JFK, from JFK back to Syracuse. So I focused on the fact that the last Saturday afternoon, when I get this note from JetBlue that your flight's canceled, from JFK to Syracuse. I focused on that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't focus on the fact that I was able to rebook within 30 minutes on a Delta flight. I didn't focus on the fact that I got probably the last seat on that plane. And the only difference was, instead of the flight arriving in Syracuse at 10:40, it arrived at 1 something.
Mm-hmm.
That was a positive. That should have been this, shouted from the rooftops type of thing, that hallelujah, I got my flight home.
Right. An opportunity for gratitude there.
An opportunity for gratitude that was missed.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when I kind of like, wow, what is going on? I had, so we had Easter.
Mm-hmm.
Love Easter. We had an amazing brunch Easter morning at our church, which was amazing. Yeah, and I just like those things that didn't show up in my reflections at all,
mm-hmm.
which told me that I was in a really bad downward spiral.
Mm-hmm. And you do your, correct me if I'm wrong, you do your reflections the next morning, right? Because you're more of a morning person. So
yes.
you're also starting your day questioning, what went well yesterday? I don't know. Or the highlight of your day being really something more of a work achievement than something that was really mattered most to you or really brought you joy. Right. And so you're starting all of your days. You kind of got in this web.
Yes,
mm-hmm.
Exactly. And so the good news is, could you imagine if I waited a quarter to review all this?
Mm-hmm.
That's what really told me, oh my goodness, don't just do quarterly. Don't just do daily, weekly. Focus once a month on really looking at because you can't even catch it necessarily in a week.
Mm-hmm.
Because you could just have a week. Okay, it's a week. I have good weeks. I have bad weeks. That's called life, right?
Mm-hmm.
It rains. We get sick. Those things happen, right? But when you start comparing week after week, and if you can look at it in a month window and say, this is really bad. And so somebody would say, well, wait, how were revenues for training? Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's happy. Book classes. I mean, you see it. You
mm-hmm.
folks are, we do have a new training coordinator, Kelly Highland. I'm so glad that she's joined us. You're probably more glad even than I am, because she can offload. She can take things that you took on that aren't part of your job.
Mm-hmm.
But you saw how good everything was going work-wise. Mm-hmm. I think, generally speaking, I think the feedback in my classes was positive.
Mm-hmm.
My coaching clients seem to be positive. But if this continues, everything else, if I continued in this downward spiral, everything else would begin to suffer.
Mm-hmm.
And where it first started suffering was at home.
Mm-hmm.
Where Ed Milet had this statement at Live to Lead, where he said he was having a meeting with Tony Robbins, and Tony Robbins said, hey, Ed, are you happy? And he said, yeah. He goes, why don't you tell your face?
Mm-hmm.
Because your face does it. Well, when family members have to, in a joking but maybe not so joking way, say, hey, maybe you need to tell your face.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you realize that there's something really wrong and you got to fix it. And the other thing that was scary for me was, not just was I focusing on all the negatives, but I wasn't finding the learnings. I wasn't discovering a lot of new teachings points. And over time, that absolutely would affect my ability to generate content. So,
what are you going to do about it?
So here's what we're going to do. The first thing I remembered was a book that I must have given to somebody, because I went to grab it on my bookcase and it's not there, but The Happiness Advantage by Sean Achor.
Mm-hmm.
And Sean comes up with 7 things. I got 7 takeaways from that book. And again, I wish I knew where my book was, because I had a bunch of notes in the book. So if one of our listeners, if I happen to loan you the book, let me know. I'll buy you one, but I'd love to get my notes back. But the first takeaway is, focus on the positives. And what Sean is talking about there was, make sure you're growing in what you do best. So for me, it was like, okay, and this was something that, had you been able to join us on our last podcast, I touched on, but I listened to another podcast where Don Yeager was talking to someone, and the guy asked the question, what are the two things that you do better than anybody else? Now focus only on those two things and get better on those two things, and that's going to dramatically improve or increase your effectiveness. So again, focusing on not positives in terms of, this was a great thing, but how do I grow in what I do best? How can I get better at what I do best?
Mm-hmm.
I love this one. Number 2, happiness comes before success.
Mm-hmm.
So if we think about that, if I would have stayed on the path I was in April, I wouldn't have success anymore.
Right. You would kind of flipped your priority. Like you said, that work things were going great, revenues were great, classes were running, they were full, but it wasn't sustainable.
It wasn't sustainable, and I wasn't focusing on, my 9, soon to be 10 grandkids
mm-hmm.
that are just adorable beyond measure, and doing so many fun things. And, I wasn't focusing on the fact that, my son and daughter-in-law's house outside of Skinny Atlas is really getting close to being a place where they can move in, and it's going to be so exciting. And they actually found, there was a den where there were some foxes. And when I was there last Saturday, I walked out, and these 3 or 4 baby foxes playing around, just adorable little things. Those are things that I should be focusing on. Saying, what a privilege to see them. Because most of the time we don't.
Mm-hmm.
So the way happiness comes before success, the note that I put here was take control of your thought life. Just don't let yourself go down those spirals. And you have to choose. So then it had me thinking, so what's missing in my affirmations that I do every morning? Well, I'm not really thinking about them. I'm just reading them off.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to get back to thinking about them. Turn negatives into positives. Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. So, giving the example of the meeting and the flights being canceled, I should have really focused on, how amazing it was that I got onto that, probably the last seat on that Delta, because that Delta flight was packed.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went to book my seat, instead of focusing on how great it was that Expedia allowed me to search all these things and book the flight, I was upset that the wait for JetBlue would have been 107 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'll probably have a discussion, I would say a discussion with JetBlue about how they're going to credit me back for the flight I didn't get. But it was a win, and everything worked flawlessly. It just wasn't what I originally planned. The other things might be, if we had a big proposal we made for a very large organization and they went with somebody else, okay, that's fine. What did we learn from that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the things we learned was we can put some pretty amazing proposals together. And maybe we need to do it a little differently. We need to start a little earlier, whatever. But there are positives, but you have to realize that there is no such thing as a negative if I learn from it. Take control, keep control. And what I put here was just live with intentionality. Just say, I'm not, this is going to be a great day. And I'm going to find it. I'm going to find the positives. I'm going to find the greatness. I'm going to find the blessings in my day. Willpower is not enough. Takeaway number 5.
Mm-hmm.
So what you have to do is you have to kind of make it easy to make the right decisions. So one of the examples he uses in his book is that he has his jogging shoes right next to his bed.
Mm-hmm.
And he sleeps in gym shorts. So when he gets out of bed in the morning, he slides into the jogging shoes and he goes for a run. So how can I make it easier to do some of those things? Don't have all my answers on that one yet. Takeaway number 6, social support is mandatory. And this was the key. Don't go it alone. I need to ask myself, why was I not listening to you and my family?
Mm-hmm.
What? And I don't have the answer right now. But the other thing I need to do is I need to give permission to people like you and my family to say, no, stop, listen to what we're saying. Don't go to where you were before. So I'm giving you permission to do that.
In front of everyone.
In front of everybody. Yeah, just call me out
Mm-hmm.
and say, hey. Now, this was interesting. Somebody actually reminded me of something that I committed to on the podcast.
Oh, wow.
Was so have you added any trainings between now and June 30th?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, nope,
Mm-hmm.
because I promised I wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So maybe part of it is just, accountability to our listeners that when we get to the end of May, I'm going to have to report back. Say, how did you do? Was I able to turn it around? I love 7. Happiness spreads happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Own the fact that you are responsible for spreading happiness. So, how do we spread happiness?
I think there are a variety of ways. I think gratitude plays into that.
Yep.
Think about the interactions that you have with people and put some intention behind them. And it's not always about being right and who's wrong. Yep. It's just like I listened to something the other day, and I'm sure I'm not going to say this as eloquently, but especially when maybe others do or say something that hurts us, oftentimes they don't really care, and we end up carrying that pain around with us. But what's the point? It's if they don't care about you or the relationship, then let that go. Let them be the ones to carry that feeling, not yourself. And when you can release things like that, I think there's a lot more space for just feeling happy or joyful and carrying with you throughout your day. So, you're in line somewhere, hold the door for someone or say thank you to people, smile, like doing things like that. It makes it a habit, right? It's a consistent way to live. And by doing that, I think others carry that with them instead of that person in line, like didn't hold the door for me or whatever, they're carrying the happiness.
Yeah. I as you were sharing that, I was thinking about in March when I went to Orlando for some Maxwell training. Of course, I'm in this super positive environment, and it's super positive as I'm going there, and I'm just really looking forward to it. And I remember the way that I was interacting with TSA people.
Mm-hmm.
I was thanking them. I was smiling. I was saying, hey, I hope you have a great day. And their eyes lit up.
Yeah.
Now, I can't imagine what the poor TSA people were thinking when I came back from Colorado Springs. They're probably like, man, I sure hope this guy just keeps moving because he is not who I want to be interacting right now.
It's funny. I think about that when I travel a lot, too. I was recently traveling alone, and it was super early in the morning, and I'm in the TSA line. It's long. People are annoyed because they let a flight crew budge the line, which is totally understandable. And I could hear my husband in the background, in my ear, on my shoulder, right? He wasn't with me, but saying like, don't talk to anyone. Don't talk to anyone. Don't talk to, but I'm like, I can't help it. So I engage in conversation with people as a way to kind of lighten the mood. And I made 3 new friends before I even got on that plane. And I'm like, if I can brighten their day a little bit, why not?
That's
especially in line at the airport.
Yeah. I'm thinking of it. There was a song when I was a kid. WSYR radio had a morning DJ. His name, Don Dower was his name. And he used to have one of these like hymn of the morning or something he would play. And I remember just one of the lyrics was, just I had it for a minute there and then I lost it, but don't go along with hatred's blindness.
Mm-hmm.
Just make the world a happy place. Show a little bit of love and kindness. Don't go along with hatred's blindness. That's the way to make the world a happy place. And it's true. We get the chance to break that cycle that's out there, but we have to be aware of doing it. And man, I lost it in April.
Mm-hmm.
So take the ownership of saying, no, it's my job to spread some kindness and some happiness. Last night, we had a Bible study at our church, and we had some discussion on what it means to, and I think I have this term right, unqualified kindness, which meant like what you're talking about, not because they deserve it.
Right. It didn't have to be earned.
It's not earned.
Mm-hmm.
You're just kind.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, wow. So we talked about that for quite a while, and that was really a great topic to be talking about. So some of it is still, it's hard still to make that mental shift. And Oprah was one that always said, keep a gratitude journal.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I was trying and wasn't looking for it. So I really need to focus more on that. But then the other one was, I had this other note here, focus on appreciating others in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I've been trying to do better at is complimenting others in front of other people.
Mm-hmm.
If I can just say, wow, this is awesome. Thank you so much for helping me with this or for doing this for me. It shifts my mindset and it shifts theirs.
Mm-hmm.
And it might shift the groups. And I was also reminded of something John Maxwell always said. What we appreciate appreciates, and what we depreciate depreciate.
Mm-hmm.
So that gets back to, I can't focus on the negative because there's so many of them. Just
Right.
let it go.
Yeah.
And I can't change it.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to say, no, okay, in this day, what is really going well?
Mm-hmm. And what really matters, like you mentioned that in your
Yes.
post, really, like, can certain things just be let go? Like, do you have to be right about it and argue with someone, or is it
Right.
just one of those things that you can just move on from? Because not for all things, you can't do that for all things, right? Certain things
Right.
really matter, and you have to hold lines, but other things, if you really can focus on the important stuff, and
Yep.
and then fill in the rest of the space with joy and happiness and the things that you want, that aren't just,
Right.
oh, I was successful at work today. Because
Yep.
after doing that for a really long time, I think you'll start to feel like it's less and less meaningful.
Exactly right.
One of the things that this reminded me of too, which I think I talked about maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, was that little evening routine as you're going to bed and going on that little treasure
Yes.
hunt of
Yep.
looking for even the smallest things to be grateful for. Not like, oh, I have an
Yes.
amazing family, or I'm so grateful for my home. I mean, yes, be grateful for all of those things, but really look at the specific day and say, like, for me, it could be the sun was shining.
Yep.
My kids got to school on time, which for me is an accomplishment. So like
Mm-hmm.
little things that just went well, or that you're grateful for, and to travel from the beginning of your day to the end of your day
Right.
as chronologically as you can, and really think about, okay, what in all of those moments just were good today. And
Exactly.
it'll also put you to sleep. So there's
Yeah.
that too.
That's awesome. Now, this is a perfect example of why and I remember, now that you said it, I remember you saying it.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't make it into my reflection for that day.
Mm-hmm.
But now it will, because I wrote it down.
Yeah. And I
Going
think
on
you'd
that
be
treasure hunt.
surprised on how many, like, just little things, went right. Like,
Yes.
I got to Starbucks drive-thru and there was no one in line in front of me.
Right.
Like really, these are silly things, but it just reminds you that, like, you have so much throughout your day to be grateful for, or that went well.
Yes. I got to Delta Sonic and there wasn't a big line.
That is an accomplishment.
'Cause that happened to me this morning, and I was able to just literally drive right in and get my truck washed.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we've got so many things to really be thankful for. So now I have no idea what I'm writing about next week, but
I'm sure
something will come
something.
up. I will. So, do you have any exciting plans coming up?
Exciting plans coming up.
Because we're full into spring.
We are, and we have a beautiful stretch of weather ahead of us.
Yes.
I've got some gardening to do. I've got some outdoor home projects to do, which I used to really look at as a huge burden. But now I've figured out that if I just use like a couple vacation days to do it, it actually can be quite enjoyable and very fulfilling to say, hey, I did that myself. And to know that my kids are somewhere safe while I'm doing it. So I'm excited about those things. How about you?
That's awesome. Well, you're going to be shocked at this one. I'm probably going to uncover my pool.
Yeah, we've got that coming up too.
Because I want to get the solar blanket on it so that I take advantage of the warmer weather to start warming it up.
Mm-hmm.
So, still working on the deck, rebuilding the old deck that's attached now to a new deck. But there's always chores, but it's really neat when you get to see it come to fruition. And the good news is I can do those things and I don't have to pay somebody else to do it.
Exactly.
So that's why we take the vacation days, right? To work on our chores.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I'm Dave Freund.
I'm Marisa Norcross.
This was The Next Page.